Hello everybody, my name is V. Narendra Kumar and we are from NRK Academy. And today we have the 12th chapter called The Primitive Thought from the extraordinary book, wonderful book called The Short History of the World by H.G. Wells. So this is the 12th chapter. We have already done 11 chapters and finally we have come to the early man, the primitive thought, 12th chapter, primitive thought. And now let us indulge in a very interesting speculation. How did it feel to be a man in those early days of the human adventure? How did men think and what did they think in those remote days of hunting and wandering 400 centuries ago? Before seed time and harvest began, those were days long before the written record of any human impressions, and we are left almost entirely to inference and guesswork in our answers to these questions. The sources to which scientific men have gone in their attempts to reconstruct that primitive mentality are very various. The sources. Recently, the science of psychoanalysis, which analyzes the way in which the egotistic and passionate impulses, emotional, of the child are restrained, suppressed, modified, or overlaid. Restrained, suppressed, modified, or overlaid, replaced by something to adapt them to the needs of social life, seems to have thrown a considerable amount of light upon the history of primitive society. And another fruitful source of suggestion has been the study of the ideas and customs of such contemporary savages as still survive, like in many parts of the world, even still we have primitive life. Again, there is a sort of mental fossilization, which we find in folklore and the deep lying irrational superstitions and prejudices, beliefs which we believe without any reason, that still survive among modern civilized people. We know very well that people hold all kinds of irrational, superstitious beliefs, and that is a kind of fossilized, like a kind of cultural DNA in people. And finally, we have in the increasingly numerous pictures, statues, carvings, symbols, and the like, as we draw nearer to our own time, clearer and clearer indications of what man found interesting and worthy of record and representation. Primitive man probably thought very much as a child thinks, that is to say, in a series of imaginative pictures. He conjured up images, or images presented themselves to his mind, and he acted in accordance with the emotions they aroused. So like a child, he was very emotional. So a child or an uneducated person does today. So a child or an uneducated person does today. Like we know, many people are very savage, like very emotional in their nature. Systematic thinking is apparently a comparatively late development in human experience. Systematic thinking is apparently a comparatively late development human experience. In fact, even now, most of the mankind can't do systematic thinking. It has not played systematic thinking any great part in human life until within the last 3,000 years. And even today, 3,000 years, people have thought, they have had systematic thinking, science, knowledge and all that. But even today, those who really control and order their thoughts, who really know and control and order their thoughts, who have knowledge, are but a small minority of mankind. So it's like we are still living in an early age, and that's true, isn't it? Otherwise, why would there be so many conflicts? Why would there be so much misery and suffering and unhappiness all around the world? So that is what we are going to understand also. Most of the world, H.G. Wells says, most of the world still lives by imagination and passion. Identities and cultural superstitions, like a child. Probably the earliest human societies in the opening stages of the true human story were small family groups, just as the flocks and herds of the earlier mammals arose out of families which remained together and multiplied. So probably did the earliest tribes. But before this could happen, a certain restraint, control upon the primitive egotisms of the individual had to be established. The fear of the father and the respect for the mother had to be extended into adult life, and the natural jealousy of the old man of the group for the younger males as they grew up had to be mitigated, had to be controlled. The mother, on the other hand, was the natural advisor and protector of the young. Even now it's like that. Human social life grew up out of the reaction between the crude instinct of the young to go off and pair by themselves as they grew up on the one hand, and the dangers and disadvantages of separation on the other. An anthropological writer of great genius, J.J. Atkinson, in his Primal Law, has shown how much of the customary law of savages, the taboos, that are so remarkable a fact in tribal life, can be ascribed to such a mental adjustment of the needs of the primitive human animal to a developing social life. Needs of the primitive human animal, like what inside we feel, what we want. That adjustment of that need to a developing social life, and the later work of the psychoanalysis has done much to confirm his interpretation of these possibilities. Some speculative writers would have us believe that respect and fear of the old man, and the emotional reaction of the primitive savage to older protective women, exaggerated in dreams and enriched by fanciful mental play, played a large part in the beginnings of primitive religion. So he's saying that's how maybe religion came. And in the conception of gods and goddesses. Associated with this respect for powerful or helpful personalities was a dread, fear, and exaltation of such personages after their deaths due to their reappearance in dreams. It was easy to believe they were not truly dead, but only fantastically transferred to a remoteness of greater power. So when somebody came in the dream, they thought, okay, it is some other world. The dreams, imaginations, and fears of a child are far more vivid and real than those of a modern adult. And primitive man was always something of a child. He was nearer to the animals also, and he could suppose them to have motives and reactions like his own. He could imagine animal helpers, animal enemies, animal gods. One needs to have been an imaginative child oneself to realize again how important, significant, portentous, or friendly, strangely shaped rocks, lumps of wood, exceptional trees or the like may have appeared to the men of the old Stone Age, and how dream and fancy would create stories and legends about such things that would become credible as they told them. Some of these stories would be good enough to remember and tell again. The women would tell them to the children and so establish a tradition. So he's saying how tradition came into existence. To this day, most imaginative children invent long stories in which some favorite doll or animal or some fantastic semi-human being figures as the hero, and primitive man probably did the same, with a much stronger disposition to believe his hero real. For the very earliest of the true men that we know of were probably quite talkative beings. In that way, they have differed from the Neanderthalers and had an advantage over them. The Neanderthaler may have been a dumb animal. Of course, the primitive human speech was probably a very scanty collection of names and may have been eked out with gestures and signs. There is no sort of savage so low as not to have a kind of science of cause and effect. Right? If you do something, something will happen. But primitive man was not very critical, not very scientific in his associations of cause with effect. He very easily connected an effect with something quite wrong as its cause. You do so and so, he said, and so happens. You give a child a poisonous berry and it dies. You eat the heart of a valiant enemy and you become stronger. There we have two bits of cause and effect association. One true, one false. We call the system of cause and effect in the mind of a savage fetish. But fetish is simply savage science. It differs from modern science in that it is totally unsystematic, uncritical, and so more frequently wrong. In many cases, it is not difficult to link cause and effect. In many others, erroneous ideas were soon corrected by experience, but there was a large series of issues of very great importance to primitive man, where he sought persistently for causes and found explanations that were wrong but not sufficiently wrong, nor so obviously wrong as to be detected or as to be found. It was a matter of great importance to him that game should be abundant or fish plentiful and easily caught, and no doubt he tried and believed in 1,000 charms and incantations and omens to determine these desirable results. Like even now we do that, good luck charm and all that. Another great concern of his was illness and death. Occasionally, infections crept through the land and men died of them. Occasionally, men were stricken by illness and died or were enfeebled without any manifest cause. This too must have given the hasty, emotional mind of primitive man much feverish exercise, dreams and fantastic guesses made, and blame this or appeal for that, for help to that man or beast or thing. He had the child's aptitude for fear and panic. Quite early in the little human tribe, older, steadier minds, sharing the fears, sharing the imaginations, but a little more forceful than the others, must have asserted themselves, like we are the head, like to advise, to prescribe, to command. This they declared unpropitious, and that imperative, this an omen of good and that an omen of evil. The expert in fetish, the medicine man, was the first priest. The priest came and said, I'll do this and you will become better. He exhorted, he interpreted dreams, he warned, he performed the complicated hocus pocus that brought luck or averted calamity. Primitive religion was not so much what we now call religion as practice and observance, and the early priest dictated was what was indeed an arbitrary, primitive, practical science. And that is a beautiful description of how it must have been in the beginning when nothing was known and they caught on to things like religion, God, superstitions, heads, some people more forceful, and the same qualities you can see today also, like how easily people get swayed by emotion and by somebody's intimidation or somebody's influence. So that is a very beautiful link also to the present. So we'll go to the next chapter, chapter 13 in the next video. Thank you so much.